Good afternoon. You're listening to Gambling with an Edge. Now here are your hosts, Bob Dancer and Richard Munchkin.
Good afternoon. Welcome to Gambling with an Edge. I'm Bob Dancer.
And I'm Richard Munchkin.
Our guest today is Anthony Curtis. We're going to be talking a lot about sports betting contests, mainly football contests that are happening on the upcoming NFL season. And there's a bunch of other things we're going to talk about as well. Anthony Curtis, welcome to Gambling with an Edge.
All right, it's good to be back. It's been a little bit of a gap between appearances, right?
Yeah, you used to be on almost monthly. I think you might be have both first place and second place tied up insofar as visitors on the show. I'm not sure.
All right, it's good to have to own some kind of record. That's cool.
So, our NFL season-long football bets are happening all over Vegas. Tell us about some.
You're talking about the contests?
Yeah. Contests.
Yeah, well, contests coming up. You know, it's all starting. The first deadline is the 29th of August, and that's for the new college football contest. So Westgate has, we'll just go back a little bit. You know, for a long time, Westgate was the thing when it came to football contests. You know, the super contest was the gold standard, and that's what everybody played and everybody wanted to do. And then, you know, along comes Derek Stevens and Circa, and they blow Westgate out of the water. And they did that a few different ways. You know, one way they did it was by Westgate decided after a while they were going to rake the pot, and they were taking 7 or 8%, I believe, out of the prize pool. So Circa says, okay, we're not going to rake anything. It's 100% return to the players. And then Circa did one other thing that was huge, which was the guarantees. And Westgate didn't guarantee, so they were, you know, the prize pool was whatever everybody, the sum of the entry fees minus the rake. And Circa was like, we're going to guarantee you X million of dollars. So if it doesn't hit this number, you've got an overlay. So you're going to be getting back, theoretically more than you put into play. So those two things just propelled Circa to the top by a mile. And Westgate kind of, took their medicine for a couple of years and then started making moves to try to compete again. And the first thing they did is they took the rake out. And they now give back 100% like Circa does. And this year they made a bunch of moves with new contests. And one of them is the college football. And that's the kind of the coolest one, as far as I'm concerned, because everything has been pros for quite a while. And this is the only, except for the last man standing at the station casinos, $25 entry fee. This is the only, what you would call a major college contest. And where the others are 1,000 to 100,000 for Grandissimo at Circa, this one's only 500. So it's kind of cool. And, it starts this weekend. And I've got a few entries in that. And then the pro contest will start next week with all the survivors. And Westgate has put in a survivor, and Circa has put in the $100,000 buy-in Grandissimo. So there's a whole lot of new things going on, I guess, in the spirit of competition for the football contests this year. So that's probably the longest I've ever talked on your show without stopping.
So what is the guarantee on the Grandissimo?
The guarantee has already been surpassed, I believe. The guarantee was $1.5 million, and it's $100,000 per. So they only needed 15 to hit their guarantee. And is my understanding, last I heard, there's something like 25 already. I predicted they'd be between 20 and 25. So I was not quite right on that. They're going to probably get up into the 35 to 40 area. But that one's not there's going to be no overlay there, but it's all being given back. So they get 30 players, they're going to be looking at $3 million if you can beat 29 other players.
Is it winner take all?
Winner take all. Yeah. These survivor things are brutal, man. I mean, they're always winner take all, which is part of the pizzazz of them. And now the winner rarely takes all because it's a season long thing. And I'm sure that Grandissimo with only 30 or 40 players won't go season long. But when you look at the big one with with 14,000 players at Circus Survivor and 14,000 and above, it usually goes all the way through. So you usually have several that split that pot, and then there are a whole lot of deals being made, behind the scenes.
And are you and Frank in the Grandissimo?
No, Frank wanted to, and he was, this is Frank B we're talking about, and he wanted to do it, and I was against it. I didn't think that there was a lot of value in it because of the people you're going to be playing against and so forth, and the huge variance of something like that. So he thought about it. He's like, I don't care. I'll do it myself. He was saying, I'll do it myself. And at the last second, he decided the same. That just didn't seem right to enter. So no, we're not going to be in that one. We're going to be in all the other ones, though.
The change in the tax law, which you get to write off 90% of your losses instead of 100%, since the payoff for these is going to be in 2026, and it's going to be documented if you happen to beat the odds and win. Does that affect you? That seems like it can make a big effect on your decisions.
We didn't. No, it didn't on ours. It will on others. Some will. But with the numbers that we're seeing right now, well, let's think about this. The prizes will be paid in 26. Yeah, so they would go under the new law, assuming it's not changed at all. The numbers don't seem to indicate that it's bothering anybody, because the numbers seem to be up everywhere at Circa for everything that I've seen. For me, especially, I've always made it clear that I declare my winnings. I always have, running a business and all. I don't want to fool around with doing screwy things. So I declare, and it will have an effect on certain things that I do, but not on this one. Yeah, never really, honestly. And that's interesting that you bring it up. I'm caught off guard a little bit, thinking that I didn't really give it much thought. Although I am playing less this year than I typically do in the contest for two reasons. I'm not sure if I have an edge anymore in these things, where I used to do better than I have been doing recently. Last couple of years have been pretty lean. And two, I've just got other things going in business. So, but I hadn't really given the tax law that much thought about it.
But next year you just might.
Yeah, I might. Yeah. Let's put it this way.
It'd be a good problem to have.
I was just going to say, I sure hope I'm kicking myself in a year from now going, oh, you should have thought about that. But, well, I would have played, then maybe I wouldn't have played. What I'm saying is I hope I have that problem. Yes.
Okay. Be careful. Be careful what you wish for.
Yeah, really. Well, again, just to go back to the contest, one of the points I'll make is that what Westgate is doing, the changes they made, is they went from $1,000 entry fee for their super contest back to 1,500. Super contest gold, 5,000 entry fee again. They're having a survivor. Okay, so the circus survivors are $1,000, and you can enter 10 times, so you can get 10,000 in action there if you want to do it. The survivor at Westgate is $5K, and I believe you can do 10 entries there as well. So that's kind of more like a high roller survivor. So it's I don't know. It's interesting to.
And if you have friends and neighbors, you can do a lot more than 10.
Yeah, you can, and. I'm not, that's another debate that Frank and I have a lot. And we're pretty much of the same thinking on that additional contest entries diminish, the edge gets diminished quite a bit as you go down the list, especially not so much in Survivor, because you can play Survivor in a way that if you're playing on the same one all the way through until you get low, and then you start diversifying, then there can be some value, quite a bit of value in that. But when you're talking about the millions and all of that, we're pretty much of the opinion that everything past the first and maybe possibly as a second is quite a bit diminished value in terms of equity and EV, because you tend to be playing your second and third picks. So why do that? There's not a lot of value in that when you're playing a suboptimal card just to have additions. So we don't really go in that much for lots of multiple cards.
Well, you're using your I don't know, you pick 5 a week, you're using your top picks for still on 4 of them. You're just varying 1 or 2, wouldn't you be?
Yeah. One or 2. Yeah. But that's significant. That's 40% of your card, if you're going to do 2 of them. So but
the difference between your first choice and on one game and your second choice on another game isn't that huge. It's pretty small, I would think, because it's a coin flip as to which one you pick.
Well, a lot of this is just empirical as well. Over the years, we just looked at the results of playing multiple cards, and we just haven't liked it. So, I'm not sure of the exact analysis of it, but we just know that we don't like it.
What do you think the ratio between sort of really knowing about football as opposed to really understanding tournament strategy?
The ratio of players or the ratio of value?
The value, which is more important, or are they equally?
No, I don't think they're equally. I think that contest strategy and tournament strategy far outpaces knowledge. Now, what we're not including there is, the quants that are really, they're modeling these things, and they're kind of bringing everything into it. And that's where I said, I'm not sure where my edge is now, if my edge is there at all. I think it is because, when you hear people talk about the World Series of Poker and the main event, and I go, well, they're taking 7% out of that, or 6 or 7% out of that pool. And they're like, no, it's still the best tournament in the world because there's so much dead money, as they call it, dead money or square money. I think there's a lot of that going on here too, that even though they're not taking anything out, there's so many players that think their football knowledge is going to bring them through, and that they can handicap their bastardized form of handicapping and pick winners. And I don't think that is anywhere near the value of contest theory and playing off numbers and, knowing when to pivot, knowing how to correlate and not correlate when that comes into play. And so I think that there's so much dead money in that it's worth doing, and playing contest wise is much stronger, and much fewer people play that way. There's way more people that just play seat of the pants and make their picks.
Well, and there's an overlay to start with in the circuit.
Well, especially when there's an overlay. I mean, you can't undervalue that. That's one of the fundamentally, I've been saying this for years now, it seems, but Blair Rodman's All About Sports Betting is extremely close, and it will come out this year. And I'm doing the chapter on contest play. And number one, the first thing you look at is equity in the contest. How much are they taking out of the pool, or is it an even money return, or is it an overlay? And those overlays are, it's powerful. It's, mathematically, it's strong.
All right, let's pivot to something else. You mentioned Blair's book is coming out. You have a slot book in the works.
Yeah.
Do you have anything to say on that?
Well, yeah. My burden these days is all the books we do have in the works. We've got so many books in the works, and they're so good. And there's so many other things happening in business for Huntington Press right now. And I painted myself into a little bit of a corner with gambling books, in that I'm the one who is the final editor on the gambling books for content, although Deke Castleman is the senior editor, and he makes them all readable and fabulous in terms of readability. But when it comes to the actual gambling aspect, I've got to read these books, and it's becoming harder and harder to find the time. So here's where all that stands. Blair Rodman's book, I was best man at Blair's wedding. So I've been able to play that card and put his book up for a couple of years now. And I can't play that card anymore. I mean, I've got to get this thing out. And we're extraordinarily close. We really are. We're in final production chapter by chapter right now. And the interesting thing is, because of the way, usually I would go, man, this is terrible, because it's going to come out a couple of weeks into the football season, and then there's going to be another 6 or 8 weeks to get it printed and get it back. But things have changed so much in the publishing world, so that as soon as it's ready and we send it to the printer, we'll also send it to Amazon, and it will be available that day or the next day on print on demand. And these print on demand books, you can't tell the difference. We've bought them. We've set them side by side with books that we run through regular web presses and things, and you cannot pick out the POD. So although Blair's book typically wouldn't have come out till toward the end of the season, it's going to come out very close to the beginning of the season. So then as soon as we're done with It's All About Sports Betting, as soon as we're done with that one, then we'll turn our attention to the slot book, which is Breaking the Slot Code, it's called. What's holding that up a little bit too is it's complicated. It's very complicated, and I've got my nose into that. But we're also almost certainly going to open up a website that goes with it, because things change so quickly there that we want the book to be almost not more conceptual. It's going to have actual examples of how to beat 26 games. The ones that a lot of people know about, Ocean's Magic and Scarab and things like that, but also games that are new. But there's just so many. And so we wanted to open pretty closely in tandem with what we're going to do with the website. And the website will be paywalled. That will be a subscription type thing. Then we still have James Grosjean's next one, which is
I'm almost afraid for you to bring it up, because I get asked, when is that book coming out, like all the time, and we've been talking about it on the show for over a year, right?
I know a year and a half, and I hate to throw authors under the bus, but this one's pretty much on him. I mean, I keep telling him, we're ready. Give us your final edits. He sent me a batch yesterday. We'll put those in today. And then he goes, but there's more, because, James is a perfectionist and he's rerunning his code again and everything else. So when it comes out, you'll be able to trust it for sure, but I can't do it till I get it. You know what I mean? He's the mastermind on this one. There ain't much editing I do on his books. He's the mastermind. Until I get his copy, that book won't be available, but I think it will be available this year. Then we got a book on baccarat, which is, it's an old baccarat book from the 1800s that Stuart Ethier and Don Schlesinger want to republish with some added information. It's one of the first books on baccarat. It's very scholarly, and people who are really into gambling history will love this book. That's about all who will love it. But, we got that. Then we got a book on roulette, believe it or not. And it's called Roulette by the Numbers. And we just don't have a book on roulette. And there's all kinds of things going on with roulette, when you're talking about physics and so forth. And Stuart Ethier also was contributing to that book. And then we've got another book that came through Don Schlesinger from a guy named Oliver Larson on blackjack. So I'm trying to get as many of those out as I can by the end of the year. And where I find the time, I don't know. But we'll get a few of them out.
I'm just curious about the roulette book. Is there anything about advantage roulette in the roulette book, or it's more for like the recreational player?
It's in the middle. I mean, there's enough for the recreational player for sure to be able to read it and understand what they're doing, and debunk systems and things of that nature. But yeah, there's definitely discussion about all the things in roulette. When you talk about location and you talk about dealer signature and our favorite topic, Richard, right? And you talk about prediction and those kinds of things, and bias, and there'll be things about all of those things. It won't be going deep into that like it's a book for advantage players, but it will be covered.
Will it be a name that we've heard of? We've had some authors on here talking about roulette.
No, it's a new guy. His name's Jack Hayes, Haze. He's been writing about roulette for years. We looked at his book. He's mathematical. And, we've gotten lots of books over the years that are not mathematical, but this one was. And then we sent it through Stu Ethier. And Ethier is, people don't know who Stuart Ethier is, but, the great Peter Griffin, the blackjack and gambling mathematician, once told me that he thought Ethier was the best gambling mathematician in the world. So, and Ethier loves games like baccarat and the off games, craps, roulette. We sent it through Stu. Stu said good stuff and added a few things to it. So it'll be the kind of roulette book that you probably want to have on, if you're a gambling aficionado, you're going to want to have it on your shelf.
Very good.
So I guess we should talk about what's going on in Vegas. Is it the end of the world?
Mm.
Um,
If you were to listen to the mainstream media, you might think it was. I don't know how many interviews I've done, from LA to London in the past 30 to 45 days, asking me, is it all over for Vegas? Is it through? Is Vegas done? Because of the numbers have been bad for the casinos in terms of visitation, although the gambling numbers aren't that bad. The gambling numbers are pretty flat, but it's fewer people, and everybody's smart enough to know that the correlation there, the fewer people that come to Vegas, the worse it's going to be for the city. So everybody wants to know why, what's the reason? And it's twofold. I tell them it's twofold. It's, and they don't really think about it this way. Everybody talks about the gouge, the Vegas is gouging, prices are up. That's really the hook of the whole thing. But I think the gouge is what has, put the knockout punch, not that there has been a knockout punch, but it certainly emphasized the other problem, which is economic uncertainty right now. And, you look at what's going on in the United States and around the world with travel and the travel industry, and everyone's feeling it. And it's all because of economic uncertainty tied to tariffs. And, me, especially Richard, I think pretty well that I'm not really political, but this is certainly tied to what Trump is doing right now. And I'm not saying it's his fault or anything else. I'm just saying this is the way it is. And economic uncertainty is leading to fewer people wanting to come here. Now you add to that the prices they've been charging and what we call the gouge on the strip, especially on the strip. And people are just, they've had it. They're just tired of it. They're tired of the ridiculous prices. We hear these stories, the $26 Fiji water. Somebody at Caesar's Palace took a Fiji water out of their minibar and got a $26 tab on that. And I was on a comp, but I went to the Horseshoe, which used to be Bally's. So it's now the Horseshoe Las Vegas at Center Strip. And they didn't have a steak. On that menu, I think they had their smallest steak was some kind of a 6-ounce filet for like $68, and everything else was in the 80s and 90s. And you just look at this and come on, man. Nobody wants to pay this kind of stuff. The sides were $20, the salads were $20. And it's kind of like that everywhere. And they've just pushed it to the point where people are getting tired. And when you start reading people's responses to podcasts about this, it's very telling. We copied one in LVA where a guy said, came to Vegas with my wife for a concert, and I felt like I was getting mugged from the moment I stepped off the airplane.
Yeah.
So, people, they're just not digging it. Now, on the other hand, the good things that come from that are the deals are going to start to get better. And we're starting to see that, there's a bunch of things that we're writing about in LVA. And, the room rates, we did our big room rate survey in July, and room rates are definitely down. And, the city is a yield management city, and they're reactionary. And, this is actually a good thing for the customer.
And I'm sorry, go ahead, Bob.
Yeah, well, after the pandemic, when the casinos found out they didn't have to give away as much as they used to be giving away, and they're still going to be making profits, they seem to have shifted to a let's see what we can get away with attitude. And that's lasted 5 years now.
100%. This all began coming out of the pandemic. When that term that I'm so sick of hearing, there's two terms I cannot stand anymore. And one of them was when you talk about PASPA, the law for sports betting that was struck down by the Supreme Court, struck down. Wasn't it just like overturned or something, whatever. But I'm just so sick of hearing that term. But the other one was pent up demand. And you would hear it constantly, pent up demand. And it was true. And the people came, they came roaring out of the pandemic with money that they had, God forbid, saved over a year. People don't like to save money. They like to get it in their hands and spend it on something right away. Well, they didn't have anything to spend it on. So now they got stimulus checks that they couldn't spend. And then they had regular money coming in that they couldn't spend. And they ran into the casinos like they'd never been in one before. And it was just ridiculous. And to Bob's point, it went on and on and on. And they kept saying, what is of running a business? One of the key things is what the market will bear, right? One of the key economic ideas of profit is you charge what the market will bear. And the market was bearing it and bearing it and bearing it again. And they just lost their minds on the casino side and said, well, let's just keep raising prices and let's see how long we can get away with it. And they finally got to the point where people are said, I kind of had enough. Going into the pandemic, resort fees, which everybody hates, resort fees were hovering around, the high 30s. And now you can hardly find one for under $50. Unbelievable.
Now, some of the places are waiving resort fees right now because business is so bad, right?
Yeah. Well, to my point where we said, here it comes. We actually, in LVA, we wrote a story in March. It was called A Hamburger in Vegas. And that was the lead story in Couponomy, which is the one I write. And I said, Station Casinos has come out with a $5.99 cheeseburger and fries, good in almost all of their casinos in their coffee shops, 24/7, $5.99. Well, Station Casino used to be famous for things like that. They were all about value. That's how they got to where they are. But in the past decade and then since the pandemic, Station Casinos doesn't give away anything to anyone for any reason. I mean, they've joined the evil empire, with Caesars and MGM. And all of a sudden we see this $5.99 hamburger. And I said, something's up, something's happening. And lo and behold, here it comes. All the bad numbers start coming and places started reacting. So back to your question, Richard, right off the bat, Resorts World, which had been having troubles anyway, rescinds the resort fees. No more resort fees. 1 week later, no more parking fees. They say ostensibly throughout the summer. So we'd be coming to the end of that going into September. And then Fountainebleau did the same thing to their list. And then the Sahara did that to their to the public in general. So we are seeing these reactions that way. That's why I say bad for the casinos, good for the public.
So Fountainebleau and Resorts were in real trouble. And so the Grand downtown also, right, was in real trouble. Are they still, is that getting worse? Are any of them going to close?
I don't think things are getting necessarily better for, let's say, Resorts and Fountainebleau. But they're okay because, they're just really well funded. They've got a lot of money and maybe they'll see that what they did during the summer was good for them. I'm not privy to what their results were, but maybe they'll see that giving a better deal will bring in more people and help things. Fountainebleau also finally upped their video poker game a little bit. They had really pretty bad video poker there and their payoffs got a little bit better. Not great, not dancer great, but, a little bit better. Downtown Grand, on the other hand, doesn't have the deep pockets. And there was a lot of word that they were in big trouble. However, I'm hearing otherwise now. And I've talked to some people that are pretty close and they said, don't believe everything you hear. And I sort of believe what I'm hearing. They said it was pretty bad in the beginning of the summer. And then things have seemed to begin to turn around a little bit. And they're like, no, we're not going anywhere. And I'll tell you this, they just ran a video poker tournament at the Downtown Grand, and people were telling me 50-50 that it even comes off, that they'll cancel it or they'll close before that. It came off and it went fine and everybody got paid. And so I don't think that any of them are on the precipice of something like that happening. But then again, when the pandemic started to hit high gear, I famously told USA Today that Vegas would never close. So take it with a grain of salt, what I have to say. Vegas closed 2 days later after I told that. It published in USA Today, Vegas closed for 72 days.
All right. Thank you, Anthony Curtis. You've given food for thought on a lot of different subjects. And thank you, Richard. And go out and hit lots of royal flushes, everybody. Good day.